how's it going, guys? My name is Zach with the Movie Castle, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Atticus Institute. This is from 2015, written and directed by Chris Sparling. The movie stars Rya Kihlstedt, William Mepother, and Sharon Maughn. And this movie is a found footage movie that kind of combines like 70s style government conspiracies and psychic experiments with the possession movie, and that's a pretty fun mixture of genres. And overall, this movie had a good idea, but sadly it wasn't executed the best. The characters weren't the best, the plot was pretty predictable, and it just never really did anything to get me engaged with it. It's one that had such a fun concept, I really wish it was better, but sadly it's an interesting concept executed in a way that's not super interesting. But before I get ahead of myself, what's the movie about? No major spoilers, I'll be avoiding the end bits, but what's the plot of the film? Basically in this movie, you get a guy and his name is Dr. Henry West. Not Herbert West, that's the guy from Reanimator. This is Henry West, but I'd like to imagine they're somehow related. But anyway, way back in the 70s, he worked at an institute, the Atticus Institute, obviously, and they studied psychic phenomenon. The movie's shot like a documentary, so half the time you're going to be in the present and you're gonna get the characters that survived doing interviews talking about their time at the institute and narrating the events, and then you'll get found footage from the past that all the people doing the experiments were taking to document their research. And as they're going around and looking at psychic phenomenon, you're going to get all the classic tests, you know, the guy holding up the Ghostbusters cards, this cool dice machine that people try to manipulate the probability, you know, stuff like that. And the found footage element of this film, I really do like because they take a good job in the color grade to try to make it look like old-timey film with that softer faded color scheme. It's pretty cool and the experiments are pretty fun, so like I said, it's a really interesting setup here. However, the people doing these studies, turns out their lead specimen was actually just a fraudster, so the lab is at a low point and their reputation is on the line, and that is when someone comes in and says, you guys need to take a look at my sister. A while ago, she moved in with us after back problems, and she started becoming a recluse and then displaying strange abilities, and right off the bat, she's off the charts, and they're like, wow, we actually found someone who can really manipulate things with her mind. However, the happiness is quite short-lived as she eventually gets darker and darker, and they realize she doesn't have psychic powers, she's actually possessed by a demon, and it's the demon moving and manipulating things, and things are going to get quite dangerous. Now, one of the interesting parts of this movie is that most of the time, possession movies, you deal with like the church and getting a priest to come and exorcise the person and try to save them, but this movie isn't about the church, it's about the government. The government really doesn't care what happens to this possessed girl, but the government now has a demon. They're going to study and try to control it. Hence the tagline of this movie, possess the possession. And yeah, needless to say, these shady government types are gonna cause a lot of mayhem when they start thinking they can control this demon. So yeah, that is one of the cooler parts of the movie, this mashup motif of taking the possession movie and putting it into your government conspiracy movie, and to get to see how a different group other than the church really causes this whole situation to become quite dangerous and messed up. And I like the setup. I like how it's filmed, but the fact is, like I said earlier, the movie just comes off as pretty flat, and part of that is you in general know where this plot is going. Obviously, the girl's gonna get more and more dangerous, and the government's gonna behave exactly how you'd expect the government to behave, all selfish and shady, and obviously, things are gonna get scarier and scarier. There's not really any twist, and there's not really any big reveal, and there was never really anything that surprised me. It just kind of seemed formulaic, you know, an interesting start that it doesn't really do anything with. And then you had the problem of the characters. The fact is, you have 3 characters that really stand out. The main doctor, Dr. West, the possessed girl, and the lead government guy. And they're interesting enough, but the big thing is the found footage section keeps us at an arm's length from those characters. You know, they don't get up close, talk to the camera, they don't really get personal with it because this is all scientific experiment stuff, so everything in the past is cold and calculated and impersonal. And in fact, there'll be points later in the film where they start to go, oh, the stress was really getting to Dr. West, and it didn't really convey that. I mean, he would have scenes where he's frustrated at the end, but you never really got his character. You never really got to see that slow decline that would have been interesting, but the past segments, the characters are so distant. Now, in the future, we have those interviews, but outside of the lead government guy, most of the people that are in the interviews are just the other lab people, and none of the other people in the lab really have a super distinct personality in the past. So it's like, oh cool, we get the future segment with all these characters I don't really know too well. Yeah. Quite early on, you start to notice the possessed girl and Dr. West aren't in the future, so yeah, you can't really flesh out your most interesting characters that way. And also with these interview segments, like the people in them are performing them good enough, but so much of the movie winds up just being talking about something that happened rather than actually seeing it. And I get it, like if you were doing a real documentary, you wouldn't just have footage of everything, but when large chunks of this movie are people talking over a series of photographs, it does really feel like something we should be listening to rather than watching. Maybe this whole story would have done better as a podcast experience or something, because yeah, it doesn't really work super well as a movie. And the thing is, that limited connection with the past, one of the things that hurts this movie the most. I get the justification saying there's no way that they would have filmed so much in the past. You know, film was expensive back then and they wouldn't just happen to have everything. But that being said, I never really bought this movie as real either, you know? And you kind of just jump into these really high-scale concepts. You're talking about demonic possession and people with psychic powers, both of which, if you just told me you had a video of, is something I'd naturally be skeptical of. Yeah, the beginning of the movie isn't too over the top, but still, if you wanted this to feel really realistic, and I'm guessing that's your justification as to keeping everything in the past at such a distance, you really needed to, you know, make it more subtle or something to make it more believable, because as it stands, I'm watching this movie and it never really did feel like a real event. You know, I was aware I was watching the movie the whole time, and I think if you can't capture that realism that you're sacrificing all this stuff for, maybe just embrace good storytelling elements, you know? So yeah, that's the problem, is it follows the exact track you think it would, with no major surprises, and I never really felt or cared anything for any of the characters. So yeah, I wish this was done better, and to get to see these psychic experiments with classic film color grading, the movie looked good, and the idea of combining the government stuff with the possession was such an interesting and original idea, but facts are simple, I just couldn't get into this one. It's one that I wish was better, and again, it does have its moments, and I love the concept, but sadly, it didn't pan out too great. If you guys are big found footage fans, or you're really into like psychic research and stuff, then you might get some entertainment out of this, but it's not the best thing ever or anything. It's definitely a semi-forgettable found footage B-side, but it didn't get me too angry either, so again, it's not the worst thing ever, just kind of a disappointment. Oh well, I guess they can't all be winners. All that being said, to everyone who's watched so far, thank you for watching. To everyone who's liked and subscribed, thank you. You really are helping the channel out. I'll leave a relevant playlist on the bottom. This should be my found footage movies playlist, where you can see me talk about other found footage movies like VHS or Paranormal Activity or Wreck. Anyway, have a good day. See you guys again very, very soon. Playlist here. Have a good day now.